You're listening to a 3CR podcast created in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.
Good morning, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Palestine Remembered. And to everyone that donated last week, thank you so very much. But we've still got a long way to go. So go to 3cr.org.au, call in 94198377 during the week. Drop by with your pennies, gold coins, anything. Bring a check. 21 Smith Street in Fitzroy. You know, we can only stay on the air stations like this so you can hear disparate and different voices that are silenced by the mainstream media. One of the only places they can speak truth to that power and have agency and unfiltered, uncensored voices is stations like this. So your support is so very, very important. 624 days of genocide, and we continue to equivocate on what our responsibilities are. It's very clear. The model is set. It was set for in Russia invaded the Ukraine, 1,400 autonomous sanctions, all sorts of different stuff, renaming chicken Kiev to chicken Kiev. We can do everything here. No longer Israeli couscous, just like everything else, stolen from Arabs, from North Africans. Israeli hummus, it's no such thing. Everything that is Israel has been stolen from somewhere else, the land, the culture, and it's time for that to end. And I'm really, really happy. I said a week and a bit ago, this is the smallest the movement is ever going to be. And think about how many protests we've had. I think it's week 86 tomorrow. Make sure you get out Sunday. This is the smallest the movement is ever going to be, but it's huge. I got a call or an email from some crew in southwestern New South Wales saying we've just constituted a group, Dubbo for Palestine. We've got, paediatricians, mums.For, doctors.For all over the continent. The movement for justice and peace for Palestine and liberation for the world from hate is unstoppable. But as we know, empire doesn't give up power easily, and in its final throes, the tail will lash out. And the tail's lashing out in Iran as we speak. I'm going to tell you about a fundraiser that's happening in Naarm today. So this is a fundraiser for Gaza and Dajawa First Nation Solidarity at the Gowanbrae Community Centre. That's near Glenroy, 2A Marigold Avenue. So the Gowanbrae Community Centre starts at 2 o'clock, goes till 6. There's plenty of food, activities and prizes and fundraising for some Gazan families who are desperately needing an aid. 100% of everything being raised, is being donated. The whole thing is being run by community volunteers. So if you're at Glenroy Way or anywhere near that, 2A Marigold Avenue in Gowanbrae, which is the Gowanbrae Community Centre. And a big thanks to Lloyd Roman and his crew out there for organising that. So from 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock, please get along and support that. As I said, the Holocaust continues in Palestine, but we're going to pivot to where the empire is lashing out today. And I'm really excited to be joined by Kia Zand, who's an Iranian artist based here in Naarm. Drawing on his mixed heritage, he combines images, sounds and sculpture to explore the relationships between geological, cultural and political borders. His work examines these themes through various mediums. Zand's creative journey began as an industrial photographer and filmmaker at the Iranian National Oil and Gas Company. His experiences deepened after relocating to Isfahan in his early 20s and later migrating to Melbourne in 2012. Zand's creative practice reflects the complexities of his background and experiences as a queer asylum seeker. He holds a degree in film and Masters of Contemporary Art from the Victorian College of Arts. Good morning, Kia.
Good morning.
Thanks so very much for being here.
No problem. Thank you so much.
One of the things that, as a marginalised, othered community we have is that people talk about us without us. Whether it's neo-colonial white expert who's telling the world just why what Netanyahu's doing is so very, very important, through to, sometimes, our supporters talking about us. Kia, why don't you tell us a little bit of your journey first, and then we'll get into what's happening in Iran. How did you get here and your story?
My story is quite long. It gets back to 2011 when I left Iran to seek asylum in Istanbul, and from Istanbul I arrived to Australia through the United Nations before the Syrian war, and from there I've been just disconnected from the homeland. Whatever I was just exposed to was through the screens and radio and stories coming from Iran. Of course, I'm away from there, and Iran has changed. It's not the same. people have a different relationship with their governments, which we've been fighting for a very long time for our sovereignty. So let's say the relationship between our suppressor and the outside suppressors, like the empire and other countries and the allies, it has been affecting many lives, of course, and it has put a lot of more pressure into Iranian people they've been fighting for a very, very long time. These poor people.
I mean, the reality is, depending on where you read, it's maybe 20% of people are pro-regime. I'm no fan of any regime, but I'm certainly no fan of a regime, the American Western imperial regime, that seeks to balkanize Iran as it has balkanized Syria and Libya, and will continue unchecked unless it's held to account. You've still got family there. What are you hearing regionally? Is it everything just located in Tehran? What's going on?
Most of my family are not in Tehran, in the capital, and I'm the only one outside the country. What I hear, my cousin has left the capital within the first couple of days when the bombing started into the capital. I am in touch with them, but of course their stories are different from the people who are remaining in Tehran. And of course there is numerous amount of number of people, they cannot leave the capital, even though they started evacuating because of some notifications coming from abroad. But a lot of people willingly staying, or a lot of people also don't have anywhere to go, especially Afghan migrants, to be honest. They have not much rights in Iran, and they cannot go back to the hand of the Taliban as well. So it's like a death sentence for them. I really feel for them. It's just very hard.
Israel does this thing saying evacuate, as if there's somewhere to go, and the assumption, this Western narrative, that you can just move. We know that Benjamin Netanyahu is a wartime prime minister. He would have been in jail on October 8, if not for October 7. He's going to go to jail, and the only way to stay in power, it seems, is to be this wartime prime minister, and so he keeps extending these wars. There's a really solid argument that, if you have nuclear weapons, you don't get quote-unquote democracy. That nuclear weapons ensures that you remain safe, and that if Ukraine had nuclear weapons, Russia wouldn't have gone in there, and that if Saddam had nuclear weapons, they wouldn't have gone looking for weapons of mass destruction. Iraq would still be contiguous, etc. The Persian people, who make up half of Iran, this is one of the things that, it beggars belief that anyone could actually look at this situation and go, okay, Israel, nuclear armed state, submarines, full Western support, is trying to, quote-unquote, defeat Hamas, 20 to 30,000 fighters who have not had any resupply. Israel's had a 24/7 conveyor belt of weaponry delivered to it into Tel Aviv. They haven't been able to defeat the Palestinians in Gaza. Iran is between 1,500 and 2,000 kilometers away from Israel. There is no land border with Israel. There are over 90 million people in there. It's the size, a bit bigger than the size of Queensland. So it's a huge bit of dirt. That this proud people, that they're going to be able to defeat them by an air campaign. That the people are going to rise up in solidarity with America and Israel after they're getting bombed. What's your feeling of people on the ground, how their sense of regime change from a regime that they all despise?
History shows us how empire and, of course, the allies like Israel have been supporting the Iranian Persianist, let's say Persian pan-Iranist nationalism, which is also for them, it's another hand to control the region, because how the king was elected and came to the power, not really elected, but came to the power, power, getting the power basically. And we saw what happened to Mossadegh.
We should speak about that. Iran was leading that post-colonial world for democracy.
Yes.
And what happened to Mossadegh and why?
Mossadegh was elected, and within 2 weeks it was dismantled, and the Shah was reinstalled, basically back to power by the CIA, Mossad, and all those allies.
MI6. Let's talk about one of the things that he did, and what he identified was how resource-rich the country was, and how little we were profiting from it. And he said, we're going to nationalise the oil companies. And BP went, this is no good. And this is not, we're not talking in conspiracies here. This is facts. I mean, the memos between MI6 and CIA saying, what do we do? How do we get this? And in fact, the British no longer had the influence over Iran, and they needed the CIA, to the point where in his first foreign trip as president of the world, the United States, Barack Obama, when he went to Egypt and made that first speech, he apologized in that first speech for American involvement in the coup in Iran in 1953. So we're not pretending, and this is not clutching at straws. No. What was democracy, what was people-led, what was human, and what could have been the birth of democracy throughout that region, genuine representative democracy, where the people were represented, but also the wealth and the assets of the country were given, the benefit of it was given to the population. The West couldn't have that.
West really fears that. I think they know Iranian people from the history, that they always fight their enemies, no matter who ruled them. They've been against their rulers and they're against the foreign hand. They want their sovereignty. And they're really, it's genuinely the kind, lovely people. They want peace for everyone and the region. And it fears them. Mm-hmm. The American empire fears to see a united nations of Arabs and Middle Easterns or Asians, something like, let's say, big countries that are united. It fears them. So the best strategy for them is to create more lines, create more countries, create more nationalistic ideas into the minorities' head. So we can see them even in Meta, how it operates between the regions. Even if you go to regions like Azerbaijan or Kurdistan, you will see Meta algorithm changes to more nationalistic themes and feeds, and you will see all these apparatus are hand to hand to dismantle the idea of Iranian nation and their sovereignty, of course. Throughout the history, I'm also seeing how we dissolved our governments and our invaders to dissolve the invader, including Islamic government, within the country, within our culture, within our, care that we have for each other. It's happening. Iran is not the same that it was from 2022 after Jinnah, Women Life Freedom movement. And government is not and never gonna be the same as before. We have seen that, and we've been in a process of people for people, and it's a very long process, but that takes generations, let's say, or maybe sooner than what we think. We will overcome this regime as well. We will overcome this war again and again, because it's been always back in the history.
Hi, this is Rafif Ziada, and you're listening to 3CR, pro-Palestinian, happily proud radio.
3CR, your station, your voice.
This is one of the things that, Western empire doesn't understand. I mean, this concept of the West is, a couple of 100 years old. American hegemony is 100 years old. Cultures that are thousands of years old.
They don't have that. That's why it's the really most strong shield, and that they don't have that in their countries. No, their country is just so fragile.
They've got Israeli couscous. We have to steal
Yes, and I just, seriously, my Israeli friend that I didn't know, he's also a Zionist. We are no longer friends. But he said, look at this Israeli salad. It was a Shirazi salad of Iran. They call it Israeli salad. Are you kidding me?
Well, when you don't have anything, and you have the inadequacy of identity, when you don't have that, and you see somebody that's independent, and you see somebody that has culture and life and idea, a belief and a connection.
Yeah.
Well, this is a threat to your inadequacy. It's a threat to your feelings of belonging, of maturity, of acceptance. And so you have to fragment it. We have to be, we fear that independence, and so we must create dependence. Dependence. And, we see that through predator capitalism, in the, particularly in Africa, where countries aren't allowed to grow crops to feed themselves. They grow crops for export. Yes. That export is done in US dollars that's, then used to repay debt, not to look after the country. Listeners, we're joined by Kia Zand, who's an Iranian artist based here in Naarm. We're talking about what's happening in Iran, people for people. The Shah and his daughter, what's going on with that wonderful family that lives in exile in luxury in the West as a puppet regime ready to be reinstalled?
There are a few of them, actually.
Yeah.
There are also Mujahideen, and they're both American-funded groups, and they are getting less and less supporters, which is really interesting how this opposed war in Iran has opposite effect. It has united the Iranians from all the aspects, all the ideologies, different thinkers, writers, queers, and everybody are united. Not everyone, but getting more and more united. It's just having a different results, unlike what they've been planning.
United against the intervention. We're not for the regime.
Nah, this is not the time to actually talk about the regime. It is talking about the invader, the outside. That's the priority. The priority is not the Islamic regime in Iran. We need to work together right now to overcome this, and we will continue our fight again against the regime. That's not the case. That would just bring divide, more divide. And organically, this is happening. And we've been through a lot of war, and we will go to war if needed. They don't have that deep culture and understanding of the old cultures and how it can overcome wars like this. So in a country vast like Iran, it's a big mistake to go with war.
The sickening thing, we've got this orange puppet. I don't know what is going on there in the United States, this guy, Trump. Yeah. But to think that, after all of the lessons, what we've seen in Iraq, what we've seen in Libya, in Syria, everything Israel's tried to do in Yemen, Lebanon, maybe the problem is that country. Maybe it's Israel. Maybe it's this artificial Western transplant of colonialism, of hate, of Zionism that exists in Palestine. Maybe it's the problem. Maybe the problem isn't everybody else around it. Maybe we just are looking at this wrong in the West. Is that possible, you think?
The problem, as in,
what's wrong with the joint? Let's pretend for a second, Kia, that you and I are Bob and Jim, and we want to go to the footy, mate. We want to have a beer with Duncan because Duncan's my mate. Yeah. All we see on the newspaper is these brown people killing brown people. Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Iran, all this crap going on. Maybe it's not the brown people. Maybe it's Israel. At some point, when is that inflection going to happen, you think? In the spaces we inhabit, in the art space that you're in, the queer space you're in, the intersexual connected space with, Indigenous crew and stuff. We get it. Indigenous people get white supremacy.
Exactly.
There has to be a point where white people get it, surely.
It's all about land. They want the land.
Resources, yeah.
And this country called Israel, it's a really strong tentacle of the West imperialism and white supremacy that has landed to our land. It's all about land and control, and their prophecy or whatever is that to expand those lands more into our lands. It is just outrageous.
Well, I'm trying to remember what Smotrich, who Australia finally did something good. We put sanctions on Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, two Israeli ministers, absolute genocideers, fascists, genocide apologists, just absolute horrible human beings. The sanctions Australia put on them, we could have put on them on October 6th. We didn't need to wait till this point. Smotrich was at an event somewhere in Europe and, was talking about, quote unquote, the greater Israel, the Nile to the Euphrates, this, biblical messianic ideology. These people don't see us as human, evidenced by, war criminal Yoav Gallant, who said we're dealing with human animals. And when he's talking about human animals, he's not talking just about Palestinians in Gaza. He's talking about all of us, and all of us from the Nile to the Euphrates, the river to the river, which is coveted by those absolute nutjob messianic Zionists that, and supported by Christian fanatics who are desperate for the ingathering of all the Jews so World War III can happen and, the King of Kings can come back and sit on the throne and all the Jews will die and we'll all ascend to heaven and be saved.
It sounds like evangelicals. Kind of.
Evangelicals,
yeah. Evangelicals.
Jesus with a G. Jesus.
But the thing is, they are running the country, unfortunately. And they have the Messiah for them, waiting for them to land. And also for Israel, they want their own Messiah to land. For the Islamic government in Iran, they want their Messiah to come. So they all need the end of the world, basically, for the Messiah to land. And all these poor people, for their ideology, is just outrageous. It is absolutely bizarre.
If we can all just lean in to the humanity we share, that each of us is a beautiful person. Yeah. Each of us is precious.
Absolutely.
Each of us is deserving of dignity and rights to live as we wish to live, to celebrate as we wish to celebrate, to believe if we wish to believe, and how we choose to do it. It should be no bearing on anybody else. We should all have the benefit of that shared humanity.
Definitely.
Kia, thank you so very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
We've been joined by Kia Zand, who's an Iranian artist based here in Naarm, and he's done some amazing work. So Kia Zand, if you go to zand.com.au, zand.com.au, you'll be able to see his work. Friends, don't forget tomorrow we've got the rally. Make sure you get out, bring your friends. We need to be showing up every single week, making sure that politicians know we haven't forgotten, to make sure from a mental health perspective, get amongst your allies and friends, comrades who believe in that concept of shared humanity. Fight on for Palestine. You should know this is as small as the movement's going to be, and I never dreamed it would be this big. And if I had a time machine, I would tell you I've just come back from the future and Israel didn't make 100 and we were all free from the river to the sea and on this planet. Thanks for listening. Share the podcast, tell your friends, and remember there's never been a better time for a free Palestine.
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast. If you found it valuable, please consider donating or subscribing to support independent community radio. To find out more, go to 3cr.org.au.